Life Audio.
Welcome to the Crosswalk Devotional. We're glad to have you listening with us. Today's topic is about what it means to fully surrender to God. We'll return with the devotional after a brief message from our sponsors.
At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than money. It's a way to support the people, causes, and community you love, because helping you put your faith into action is at the heart of what we do. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
Did you know that the Salvation Army produces a network of podcasts? One of those shows, Words of Life, is a 15-minute weekly show featuring testimonies, interviews, and conversations on topics impacting the church today. Coming up on Words of Life is a 6-week series with author, podcaster, and counselor Dr. Zach Clinton. He joins us for a series focused on encouraging men as we discuss the challenges we face in 2025.
That there's probably well over 35, upwards potentially of 50% specifically of men that would argue and say that they don't have one person in their life that they feel safe enough to open up to or to talk about, in a sense, heartfelt things. That's not just a problem, man. That's a disaster. And it's that recognition that God never promises the absence of pain, but he always promises his presence in the midst of our pain.
Listen to Words of Life wherever you get your podcasts or visit wordsoflifepodcast.org.
Let the Poor Say I Am Rich by Angela Anderson. I stood there in awe with the rest of the crowd. I wanted to scream for help, but I was speechless. I could not believe what I was witnessing, and I was terrified at the thought of a tragic outcome. There was a woman drowning in the middle of the ocean, and no one was coming to her rescue. She accidentally fell off the pier, and she was too far out for even an experienced swimmer to reach her. Her arms were flailing, water was splashing, her head was bobbing up and down, and the crowd just stood there watching it happen. There was a lifeguard nearby, and he was also a silent bystander. I was perplexed. I thought it was the responsibility of the lifeguard to save people from drowning. Why wasn't this lifeguard jumping in the water to save this woman? A few more minutes went by. It felt like everything was happening in slow motion. I saw the woman begin to get tired. Her arms were no longer moving wildly in the air, and the water around her seemed to calm down. Then the worst possible scenario occurred. The woman went under. The crowd gasped in unison. Immediately, the lifeguard dove into the water, and within seconds, he appeared with the woman in his arms. He swam back to the pier while pulling the woman, who was serenely floating alongside the lifeguard. Once they reached the bottom of the pier, they were pulled to safety by a team of rescuers who had just arrived on the scene. Occasionally, I think about that incident, and my mind goes back to the moment when the lifeguard saw the woman drowning, but he did not instantly act. It was later explained to me that the lifeguard was waiting for the woman to stop struggling in the water. If the lifeguard jumped in to save the woman while she was still fighting for her life, he might have been pulled down into the chaos, and both may have drowned. The lifeguard could not force or coerce the woman to be saved. Instead, the lifeguard had to wait until the woman surrendered and allowed herself to be saved. It is the same way with God and his continuous desire to save us. The verse for today, found in Matthew 5:3, indicates that the poor in spirit will inherit the kingdom of heaven. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? The word poor in this context does not refer to the lack of material wealth. On the contrary, To be poor in spirit is to recognize your spiritual poverty and your deep need to be saved. There is an awareness that salvation is not something that can be earned. There is an understanding that God's favor is a gift. There is an acknowledgement that you must depend on God's grace rather than rely on your own righteousness, accomplishments, or strength. For those who are poor in spirit, there is spiritual humility, which is the opposite of pride or self-sufficiency. You can freely admit your need for God and His mercy. For example, the tax collector in Luke chapter 18, verse 13, had a heart of repentance when he prayed the words, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." There is an outward sign of dependence on God and submission to His will. Once you reach this point in your life, there is an openness to God. You are receptive to the gospel. Only those who realize their need will fervently seek and receive the promise of God's kingdom. This promise is not a future event. Instead, it is referring to belonging to God's kingdom in the present. Those who are poor in spirit are reaping the reward of living under God's rule, which is characterized by His grace, peace, and hope. Moreover, it is the foundation of a faithful, grace-filled life. You will experience the richness of His love. To be poor in spirit is to fully surrender. Just like the woman who was drowning, once you accept that you cannot save yourself, you stop struggling and you give God permission to act. Just like the lifeguard, God is patiently waiting for you to be still so that He can jump in and rescue you from the deep waters of your life. Intersection, faith, and life. Are there areas of your life that you have not surrendered to God? What will it take for you to relinquish control? Further reading, 2 Peter 3:9.
The Crosswalk Devotional is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.
At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than money. It's a way to support the people, causes, and community you love, because helping you put your faith into action is at the heart of what we do. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at thrivent.com.